duties as Secretary of Defense has been to remove as many barriers as possible for talented and qualified people to be able to serve this country in uniform.
They'll be allowed to drive tanks, fire mortars, and lead infantry soldiers into combat. They'll be able to serve as Army Rangers and Green Berets, Navy SEALs, Marine Corps Infantry, Air Force parajumpers, and everything else that was previously open only to men.
Wow, every time I see that video, I am reminded of the greatness that we've come from. So I just want to say, welcome everyone. Today is a remarkable day as we gather for our foundation's inaugural event. I'm Nikiba Estelle, the co-founder and current president and executive director of the Women's Air and Space Foundation, Incorporated. And I am absolutely thrilled to see so many of you here. Our event carries a powerful theme, why not women? This theme invites us to dive into a critical discussion about women in the Department of the Air Force, a conversation that's long overdue, and to talk about why this foundation is so important. Before we delve into today's panel discussion, let me share a bit about our foundation. The Women's Air and Space Foundation Incorporated is relatively new, having taken flight in 2022. Since then, we've gone from a dream to a reality, and today starts a new flight plan for all women, officer, enlisted, civilian, guard, reserve, across all career fields who served in defense of our great nation in this realm. Our mission is clear: to honor the incredible women who served in the Department of the Air Force, to capture and promote their achievements, and to provide a platform for crucial discussions like the one we're going to have today. Ultimately, we're focused on standing up a digital museum to have a permanent way to recruit, retain, remember, and inspire. It's my privilege to introduce Mr. Terrence Adams, the visionary who breathed life into our foundation and continues to be a driving force. I'd like to invite him to share a few words.
Hey, Kiva, so thanks for your leadership. This has been a long, kind of 2.5-year journey to get where we are today. So I am happy that we have our first kind of event. So big thanks for you and the team. It was going to be a fascinating conversation. We got some great panel members that are on today, and looking forward to hear their remarks. We're on a quest to highlight, recognize, commemorate the contributions that women have made into air and space while inspiring the next generation to serve. And this will be our first conversation. So I'll send it back to you as we begin. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Before we continue, I want to take a moment to express our deep appreciation to dedicated members of our board. Thank you, Karina Harrison, Tamara Johnson, and Yolanda Bogany for your commitment. And a special thank you to our event committee led by Karina Harrison. Your dedication to ensuring the success of today's gathering is truly commendable. We couldn't have done it without your hard work and creative ideas. So now let me introduce you to someone extraordinary who will guide us through today's discussion. Meet Cindy Serrano Roberts, a retired lieutenant colonel, wife, and mother. She's also the CEO and founder of the Global Freedom Group, a 501c3 nonprofit organization with a mission to empower women and girls to lead extraordinarily in public spaces. Cindy brings a wealth of experience and insights, both from her distinguished military career and her work as a nonprofit leader. Through her nonprofit, she's also a member of the U.S. Institute of Peace and their Civil Society Working Group. In this capacity, Global Freedom Group supports and advises federal agencies and Congress on the effective implementation of the U.S. Women, Peace, and Security Act of 2017 and the advancement of the Women, Peace, and Security Agenda. Cindy will be moderating our panel of experts. And I can't wait for you to meet our panelists, who will bring a wealth of knowledge and insights to our conversation. But this isn't a one-way conversation. We want you to participate too. Feel free to ask questions and share your thoughts in the chat as we explore these critical issues together. And of course, if you're interested in being a part of our foundation, please add your name and email address in the chat. So without further ado, let's get started with our panel discussion. Thank you again for being here and for joining us in this important conversation. Over to you, Cindy.
Thank you so much, Ms. Estelle. I am delighted to be a part of such an exciting event tonight. As someone who's deeply connected to the Women's Air and Space Foundation and Corporation's mission, I am thrilled to facilitate today's inspiring discussion. But before I introduce today's panel members, I'd like to go over our rules of engagement. Okay, we're going to put a slide up, and really what we want to do is take this space that we're in and be able to lean into it, and then lean into it in a way where we're solution focused in this dialogue, and give us an opportunity to pause, reflect, and listen to learn. We want to make sure that this is a place where we can observe the platinum rule and embrace diverse perspectives. We want to walk away making sure that everyone feels seen, heard, and respected. So now I'd like to highlight that if your Zoom display has your name, your first name, last name, and your pronouns, then that will be helpful to our chat moderators. And we encourage full participation and look to get to as many questions as possible. Feel free to ask questions in the chat throughout the entire panel discussion, as our moderator, Monica, will present them to our panelists at the end of the facilitated portion. In the event of any technical difficulties and we're booted out, we ask that you rejoin using the same Zoom meeting invite. Okay, now on to the good stuff. It is my honor to introduce our panel members that will participate in this evening's discussion. First, we would like to extend a very warm welcome to Ms. Denise Goodwine, who is the Chief Information Officer for the Department of the Air Force, comprised of the United States Air Force and United States Space Force. Ms. Goodwine leads 3 directorates: Enterprise Information, Technology, Data and Artificial Intelligence, and Cybersecurity. She supports 20,000 cyber operations and support personnel around the globe with a portfolio valued at $17 billion. She provides oversight of the Air Force's information technology investment strategy, from networks to cloud computing, enterprise policies, and a robust of related matters for the Department of the Air Force. Ms. Goodwine also served 36 years in active duty and commissioned service into the Air Force Reserves in 2003, ultimately retiring as a lieutenant colonel in 2022. Welcome, Ms. Goodwine. Next, we would like to welcome recently retired Lieutenant General Mary O'Brien. Lieutenant General O'Brien's last job on active duty was the Director of Command Control Communications and Computer, Cyber, and Chief Information Officer, J6, Joint Staff, the Pentagon, Arlington, Virginia. She received her commission in 1989 upon graduation from the U.S. Air Force Academy with a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry. She has served in a variety of command and staff assignments. In October 2019, Lieutenant General O'Brien volunteered to serve as the General Officer Champion for the Women's Initiative Team, also known as the WIT. The WIT is a Department of the Air Force barrier analysis working group charged with identifying barriers to women's service and advocating for policy changes to eliminate those barriers. Welcome, Lieutenant General O'Brien. Next, we would like to welcome Ms. Christy Nolta, Senior Executive Service, retired. Prior to retirement, Ms. Christy Nolta was the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Reserve Affairs and Airman Readiness. Her responsibilities included planning, establishing policy for, and implementing activities crucial to the Air National Guard and Air Force Reserve, as well as total force readiness. Ms. Nolta entered the Air Force Reserves in 1986 after receiving her commission through the Air Force ROTC. During her career, she held a variety of assignments in operations management, personnel, and public affairs. She was also a champion for the Women's Initiative Team, impacting policy changes for the betterment of women. Ms. Nolta, welcome. Last but certainly Sergeant, retired. Global team building. A decorated combat veteran, she has made a lasting impact on 3.8 million service members through her work in diversity, equity, and inclusion within the Department of Defense and various governmental agencies. Dr. Weatherspoon is a published author of a self-paced journal and was quoted in 30 Days of Empathetic Leadership and in The Women We Watched. She is the Chief Engagement Officer and owner of the Space Coast People Solutions, a human resources consulting firm specializing in coaching, education, and training in leadership, relationship building, and cultural intelligence. Dr. Weatherspoon, welcome. Thank you so much, all of our panel members, for joining us today. We're excited to glean great insight from you all. We will ask each of you a few questions to gather your feedback before taking questions from the chat. As again, we will hold all questions until the end when Monica will share some of those questions from the chat. But first, we want to open with a question that is for all of our panelists. So with over 100 years of knowledge combined, I would like to ask, with numerous organizations that support women in various capacities, including those serving in the Department of the Air Force, in a landscape that is rich with such initiatives, what sets this particular organization apart and makes it indispensable in your opinion? Again, this question is open to our entire panel.
So good afternoon.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, go ahead, General O'Brien.
All right, this is really important, and I apologize if I go just a little long, but I really do want to share with you why being here with these three impressive women on the panel is so important to kick off the Air and Space Foundation, and why I'm excited about the creation and the opportunity to participate. Let's go back to October 1948, when the United States Air Force Security Service was established. Over the next 71 years, the name changed: Electronic Security Command, Air Force Intelligence Command, Air Force Intelligence Agency, FISRA, 25th Air Force. But the intelligence collection, operations, and analysis mission not only remained, it grew larger and larger as existing threats remained constant and the modern threats emerged. In the headquarters building for this organization, which has been the same for all these years, there were two rows of photos. One had the top row had all of the commanders, and the second row had all of the senior enlisted leaders. For 64 years, both rows of photos, this long row of photos, were all male. But in May 2012, Chief Master Sergeant Arlene Heath became the senior enlisted leader, the first woman senior enlisted leader, responsible for 11,000 enlisted members in 116 units across the globe. To the women that served in the intelligence community, where our enlisted force performs the majority of the mission, unlike in the aviation where you have officers who are flying, it was a really huge step. The commander photos remained all men until May 2017, which is when I took command of 25th Air Force. At my own request, we never released a public affairs announcement about being the first woman in nearly 70 years to command the intelligence enterprise. But a lot of people who would come to the building, and we used to hold a lot of conferences, even for outside organizations, a lot of people would comment on what it meant to them to see Chief Heath's picture and to see my picture at the end of that long row of male former commanders. What does this have to do with the foundation? In October 2019, the Chief of Staff of the Air Force decided to merge 24th and 25th Air Force. There were many, many conversations about the designation of this new NAF. Our historians begged Headquarters Air Force History Office to preserve the history, truly this legacy that goes all the way back unbroken to 1948. But instead, the CSAF decided to reactivate 16th Air Force. And according to Air Force policy, which we all know, I know from my work on the WIT, policy can be changed or there can be exceptions to policy. However, according to policy, the heritage of an organization 16th Air Force, it provided administrative support for Strategic Air Command bombers that were rotating into European bases. That overwrote 71 years of the intelligence mission history. So the photo of the first woman, also the first woman of color to serve as our senior enlisted leader, was taken down. My photo was taken down. The long row of these photos were replaced with photos of men who had never served a day leading the intelligence mission, and this huge list of spectacular accomplishments. It's as if it never happened. And Chief Heath and I simply cease to exist in our Air Force heritage. So obviously, I'm still, as you can tell, I'm emotional, I'm hurt by this. I was hugely disappointed by this decision, but it made me wonder, how many more times have our Air Force leaders been so focused on preserving the past that they aren't aware that they're failing to preserve the legacy of the more modern accomplishments of our trailblazing women? I truly believe the Women's Air and Space Foundation can preserve this history by capturing, commemorating, and celebrating women who serve in the Air Force, and even more recently, the Space Force. So I am thrilled that this is off the ground, and I'm really looking forward to its accomplishments and what it will do in the future.
Great example, General O'Brien. I know someone, as a former WIT member, when I was still on active duty, we would have conversations about that on a much lower level. I mean, just the power in reflecting on history, but also making sure that it's totally encompassing, that nobody is being left out of these important conversations, contributors, and even people that are working so hard behind the scenes, even at non-rated positions, for example. And I think that is just such a great point. I would love to hear from some of our other panel members and really kind of pull the thread on this as to why this particular organization is so indispensable.
Thank you, Cindy. I'll go. And I want to build on the conversation that General O'Brien just started. Because if you think about why do we need organizations like this in the first place, and other organizations to honor the contributions and even highlight our accomplishments as women and any other underrepresented community. And so I thought about this, and here's what my summation. One, America has a short memory. And so organizations like this, we have to educate them on our accomplishments and make sure that it's documented. Number two, I think America and society often leans towards the majority. So as the minority, I think that we need to let them know that we are small but mighty. And then thirdly, I believe also that America is very selective. And so I want to make sure they understand that we are the choice. And so that women are contributors and that we should be seen as such. And so I'm going to pull on the thread a little bit to what General O'Brien talked about. If you're in cyber and IT, that is a male-dominated career field. And so it is extremely important as women how we show up. Now, I know that's a whole different webinar than what we're going to talk about today, but how you show up as a woman in a meeting, how do you show up in a conversation? How do you show up on stage? Because we are seen as the minority. And so I'm going to add a little twist to that as well. So myself, just a little old Venus from a small town, community in Tampa, Florida, that statistically I should not be where I am, but here I am. And I think it's these types of organizations that give me a voice and will document the history in which that I believe I'm setting today as the first African-American female CIO for the Department of the Air Force. And why that's interesting, because I've spent 36 years in the Air Force, as you heard through my bio. But again, like pictures that General O'Brien spoke about, when you look in the CIO's office, all the pictures of all the previous CIOs are there. My picture's not there, but I'll fix that but what's interesting about that is people start to stop commemorating the achievements. And so I think these types of organizations, one, because it's important that others see us. And it's important that how we see ourselves as well. And so I just want to make sure that we could fix that in history as well. So again, I say, that this organization helps us to capture that. And so I think that's why it's important, same as the pictures that they took down in the intelligence community that General O'Brien spoke of. I want to make sure that that's not lost for the Department of the Air Force as well.
Wow. Ms. Goodwine, before we go to Ms. Nolta, to sort of tap into her perspective, I want to just kind of make an observation here when we talk about, what we see on the walls and then how we show up. I don't think you can separate the two. I remember several years ago when I worked on the air staff and we had a meeting in the A1 conference room. And I remember sitting in there and looking at the wall. And at the time, General Grosso was the A1. And I mean, you're looking, and you're like, boop, there's a spot on the wall that she's going to go up on, and even, Miss Nolta, as I looked to transition to her, when I was an action officer interfacing with her office, when I would go walk behind the glass doors and you're walking past the pictures, right? That's history. But as you peek in the offices and you're looking at who's sitting there, it can be either encouraging or discouraging, and it sends a message. But it is just always so encouraging when you walk into an office, where maybe you're briefing Lieutenant General Harris and Miss Nolta at the same time, and you're sitting there and you're like, oh my goodness, this just made up for half a mile. I just walked the E-ring to brief her on, what's going on within the 811th FSS and what's going on Andrews, it makes a world of a difference, and it helps you show up in a very different way. I can't tell you how many times, again, I've left meetings, from the CV's office or from behind the glass doors, and you kind of feel you're standing a little taller. You're like, I statistically don't belong here, but here I am. And so with that being said, Ms. Nolta, I would love to bring you into this with your perspective. Again, someone who has watched you from up close and afar as an action officer, as a WIT member, and I've just watched you kind of bring some of those barriers down and really increase representation. And so I would just love to hear some of your thoughts on what makes this organization so indispensable.
Well, I have to say, ditto to my colleagues. They said they brought out some very important points that I would have brought out as well. But I guess I would add that establishing a foundation like this is important because there is strength in numbers, and gathered together for a common vision and purpose of elevating the history of women in particular, but also empowering and motivating the next generation to see themselves as being able to do those things that the women who came before were able to accomplish, and the opportunity to bring voices together. A foundation like this, I mean, with this inaugural event as an example, bringing influential voices together for a broad audience to hear perspectives. It's not unlike what Women, Peace, and Security is also trying to do, right? It's bringing gender issues, at the fore as part of the conversation of what we need to bring in from a diversity of thought perspective for planning and operations across the spectrum of operations. And so I think this is just incredible what you guys are you have started here in the last, less than 2 years, and I am so excited about what the future brings, and I hope to stay involved and engaged as you guys go forward. One of the things I guess I would like to highlight too is just changing the language of how we talk about who we are, what we do, what we bring to the fight, and changing the way others talk about us. So I was listening to a panel discussion talking about, someone told a vignette about how they were going to be the only woman going into a deployed location. And someone brought to their attention, you're the only woman, and, the logistics are going to be kind of hard. Maybe you want to, reconsider the deployment. And she was taken aback, like all of you are probably taken aback. And it's like, whose fault is that planning was not foreseen and done, because all logistics is planned and there's a standard. And so why wasn't that the standard? So changing the way we think, I think a foundation like this, the Women's Air and Space Foundation, can help with changing the way we think. And that's all. Over.
Ms. Nolta, I love what you're saying, because oftentimes I've heard, as I came up through the ranks as a Latina, hey, you're the only Latina in your year group, or you just make up 2% of the people in your year group, the population. Representation matters, and whenever I said, well, I don't know, I'm feeling a little bit discouraged. I don't really feel like, I'm going in the direction, or I'm on the trajectory that I want to be on. And I would always hear that. But what we never talked about, what I never heard, was the other side of that, which is, hey, we also have to try to change the culture. That the culture also is responsible for creating a more welcoming environment, for creating a more equitable environment, for creating more equitable access to opportunities and promotion in school, and those certain positions that get your name in the conversation. And I just think you're spot on. Like, it's a two-sided conversation. It's not just, hey, you should just keep plucking away and put your head down, but we need to talk about the environment, because the environment is what enables, more women, and what widens the path for more people to come through. And so I just absolutely love that. Dr. Weatherspoon, I would love to hear from you. What makes this organization so indispensable based on your experience and through your lens?
So I will share. So I'm a big proponent of the power of words, right? So there were a few words that came up for me when I heard about this organization. And so it's representation, celebration, realization, commemoration, and then documentation, right? And so representation is really important to me, because it wasn't until year 18 that I ever saw a command chief that looked like me. And her name is Shalina Fry. And I'm visiting one of my first sergeant friends, and I walked past the wall, and I was like, I realized in that moment, I had never seen a command chief that looked like me. And she was the AMC command chief at the time. And then she was also accessible, because I took a shot and sent her a note on Facebook. And now she is, we're connected in so many different ways. But I had realized, 40 something years old, 20 something years in the Air Force, and I had never seen that. And so I think an organization like this continues the legacy of representation, because long after the pictures come down off the wall, there will be an organization like this that kind of keeps that momentum going. You can go and look. And I remember, we learned about who the first Chief Master Sergeant was in the Air Force, but I was curious, who was the first one that looked like me? And I found her. Her name was Dorothy Holmes. And not only did she look like me, she was also from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. That is where I am from, right? And I think representation leads to celebration, which energizes you. When you see and you understand that history is there, you aren't the first, because being the first to do anything is extremely scary. So a lot of times we find ourselves looking to see if somebody did it first, because if we know that they did it first, then we could also do it. And and that's where the realization part comes in, right? So you see somebody, they did it already. You like, you know what? I can do that. I can continue to go through whatever challenges I'm facing, because let's face it, the Air Force is a microcosm of our country at large, right? And so there are a lot of challenges that we face as women in uniform that a lot of women in corporate America face outside of uniform. We're not too separate from those issues and challenges. So to commemorate and honor and respect the struggle and the work that goes into entering these prominent spaces and leading and making changes and being able to write policies and having your voice heard at the table is something that I think the WASF, long after, you know, all of us may lose our memory a bit, will still continue to be there as a source of information for women, you know, just like me. So, and the last thing, documentation, which we have to continue to write our own history. If it's not written down, it didn't happen. Oral history is no longer a legitimate source of information. I remember when we die off and that information dies with us. So I think documenting it, continue to have pictures, continuing to have the conversations that we're having, right? Because what I am learning being outside of the Air Force, there are some challenges in the diversity and inclusion space. Nobody wants to talk about it. We're changing the names of programs. You know, it's no longer a thing. We don't need to do this anymore. When we have organizations dedicated to the legacy of the women in Air and Space Force, I think that is such a powerful tool that we need to continue to grow and to tap into potential that we're not quite tapping into as much.
Dr. Weatherspoon, you're spot on. And as we talk about commemorating in order to remember, and we're talking about accessibility, if we're not accessible to people, to, you know, we're not going to ever learn their story. We're not going to understand what they've overcome. There's so much, we're going to have so many blind spots. And so you've touched on that, you know, Lieutenant General O'Brien touched on that, you know, just kind of protecting history and kind of commemorating accomplishments of you know, pioneers of the past. And so I want to continue to build on this conversation. And I want to ask Ms. Nolta, and I want to ask you, Dr. Weatherspoon, that as members of the Air and Space Force, right, our service is inherently propelled by the influential force of aviation. Yet within the expansive realm of air and space responsibilities, there exist numerous contributions by women that extend way past aviation, and they warrant heightened recognition. So what other contributions by women in the air and space area of responsibility do you think deserve more recognition? And how can we ensure that these achievements are celebrated? Ms. Ilta, we can
You
start
want me to
with
go?
you. Yes.
No, I don't want to go first. That's yeah. So there's so many accomplishments, and I think that you know, that we talked a little bit already about capturing that history, writing it down, but also public recognition of those accomplishments on a, you know, routine basis. In ways maybe we haven't done before, to raise the level of attention. And I think the foundation can be really key to helping do that. You know, there's all kinds of awards out there that, you know, are we paying enough attention to elevating women to, you know, to be recipients of these awards, or to be put forward for these awards? Are we doing that kind of thing to be able to celebrate those accomplishments? I mean, we know that there are a lot of women that have, you know, are in space, in the Space Force, that are in the Air Force, that are doing a lot more, like you said, doing a lot more than flying. I mean, you know, Lieutenant General O'Brien is a case in point. You know, cyber and intel has got a lot more women, I think, than, you know, the air crew career field. I came from a career field when I was in uniform in public affairs, and we had a lot of women in there. And so, you know, what we tried to do was to elevate by recognition and publicly recognizing those accomplishments. I do think that when firsts happen, that firsts are important, because firsts break open where people hadn't maybe been thinking before about where women weren't as much as where women are now present. And so I think taking advantage of those is continues to be important. And then highlighting women in visible places. General Bryan told a great story about the pictures on the wall. What about our installations? I mean, how many installations are named after women? I don't think there are any in the Air Force or the Space Force yet. I think the Army has one that's specifically named for a woman. And so I'd like, I think we should be looking at those kinds of opportunities to raise the visibility nationally that women have contributed to national security, and that their contributions both in uniform and in civilian clothes have been extraordinarily important. I mean, you just look at the number of women that are even serving in the government right now in leadership positions. I mean, the Deputy Secretary of Defense is a woman. And so I guess I would just finish by saying that we need to recognize publicly the accomplishments of women a lot more than we do.
I love that, Ms. Nolta. The great example, and I think a very achievable and doable example as we're looking at renaming some of our military installations. Who is a part of it? I would even peel the layers back and ask, who is on the naming committee? Where are these suggestions coming from? Who's pulling the data? Because that's the feeder of it. That's where it starts. And that is presented to the committee, who in turn decides on, what the name is going to be. And so I think that's a really great, just very realistic and tangible example. Dr. Weatherspoon, what contributions by women in air and space do you think deserve more recognition? And how do you think we can ensure that these achievements are celebrated, ma'am?
All right, so I am a little biased. I come from a support background. And what I realize is that those communities is a thankless job, right? So there are a lot of innovation that goes into the support structures, the technology that we use for the support functions, and some of the innovative programs like AFWorks. And so I only know AFWorks exists because I have a young lady that I used to be her first sergeant. She does things with AFWorks, but before I retired, I didn't see a lot about it. And I mean, she's traveling, doing all these focus groups. So there are women in those innovative spaces and the spaces that are very people-centric that are making strides to ensure that policies and programs and things are put in place so we can operate smoother. And I think, aviation is great. That is what we do, right? We, as an Air Force. And space, we do as a Space Force, right? But I think we forget about the functions that are in place that support those missions. And so I think we should dig deeper. Me and my ex-husband will often banter about which was more important. He's a maintainer and I was logistics, right? And we used to say you can't fly without supply, and you absolutely cannot, but you rarely hear about, any type of innovation or great invention that happens in the logistic world. So I think those support functions, if we dig a little deeper and kind of widen our scope of what makes the big machine work as effectively as it does, then we'll be able to find some of those great inventors there, because women are, I think, by nature, probably the most creative creatures on the planet. We definitely make a dollar out of 15 cents. We can make a meal out of only 2 ingredients, and we are making things happen every day in every space. But nobody's, a lot of people just not talking about it because I think it's a cultural mindset.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great example. I too come from a support background, and a lot of times we're in the background. I can't tell you how many times, As an airman, before I even commissioned, I'm working mids at lodging, and I'm terrified that Operation Nighthawk is going to take place and my boots aren't shined, right? And I honestly, I'd be like, oh my God, tonight might be the night. And like, it was never the night, And I remember, that feeling. And then when I commissioned, I just remember like, I've got to get there, right? Like I know firsthand how it feels, not just as a woman. There's so many intersections. That is one piece of it too, but being an airman and being in a support field where you're in the back supporting, and a lot of people don't see, the contributions being made. They don't see how the sausage is being made, and you're just so proud of it. And it's so important. It goes such a long way when people feel seen, when the work is recognized. And you tapped into the very next question, actually. And so this question is for Lieutenant General O'Brien and Ms. Goodwine. And so, ladies, across 3 decades, your contributions have been instrumental in molding and enhancing the service into a more lethal and agile force. So as we embark on expanding the Women's Air and Space Force to guarantee the inclusion of recognition of women, what legacy regarding your impacts and achievements do you think will have on the next generation of women in the military and space industries? And Lieutenant General Bryan, I would like you to jump in first, please.
Okay, great. I have had some time, both right before I retired, and of course I've been retired for almost 2 months now, to do some reflection. But also I've had some opportunities for people to reach out to me in ways that I wasn't available. So I'm on LinkedIn now, and so I want to share something that made me realize, what do I want my legacy to be, and how can I continue to contribute, although I'm no longer on active duty and serving. And so it's my wish that the example I set, especially when I didn't know somebody was watching what I was doing, will continue. And I want to share with you a decision that I made as a wing commander in 2011, helped an airman and her family today. And I'm so grateful that she took the time, and this is somebody that I've never met, sent me this note on LinkedIn, November 27th. Ma'am, we've never met in person, but I was fortunate to experience your wake like a speedboat wake a couple of weeks ago, and thought you might like to hear a story about your enduring legacy. This note serves that intent. Recently, I requested to work remotely for a few months while a family situation gets sorted out. The approving official said you opened I circled his, right? I know I deliberately have mentored a lot of women, but you opened his eyes into the ease of approving my request. He shared a story about how you hired a pregnant exec without batting a lash. You showed him how to provide modifications to the standard operating procedures, thereby changing the norm. I do not know how many years ago you made this decision, but it is still impacting families across the Joint Force. Thank you for everything, with deep appreciation. And I was like, that's amazing. And I sent her a note back, and I think it would be helpful for all of you to sort of have the rest of the story, because to that person, it might have seemed like, done, but there was more to it. And what's interesting is it wasn't a problem that I was facing. It was the individual. So here's what I sent back. Wow, I'm so glad you shared this with me. I guess you never know who's watching. You might be interested in the rest of the story. The pregnant exec, who was a captain but now is a lieutenant colonel, interviewed and was selected for the position before she knew she was pregnant. A week before she was supposed to start, she came in to see me to tell me she could no longer take the job. And when I asked why, she told me because she was pregnant. And I asked if she was having a high-risk pregnancy, and she said, oh, no. And I asked if she was suffering from, debilitating all-day sickness. And she was like, no, actually, I feel great. And then she said, well, I'll be out on maternity leave. Back then I think it had just gone to 8 weeks. And I said, well, how far along are you? And she was like, however many weeks. And I said, so we have 7.5 months to plan for somebody to fill in. And we could actually let that person fill in for shorter times when you go on leave before you deliver. And she's like, oh. And I said, well, do you still want the job? And she's like, well, yeah, I just didn't think you would want me to do it. So we decided that she would start as planned in a week. And if she or I felt at any time that she wasn't performing, we would make a change with no harm to her career. She did great. We had a great person fill in for her. She was one of my best execs ever. And so I said, I'm so glad your approving official happened to be watching. I have no idea who this was, watching on the periphery back then, and that my decision made an impact on him that is benefiting you and your family. Thanks so much for taking the time to share this with me. That's the kind of legacy I would like to have. But I think the foundation can be helpful because I love the comment when my panelists make about their strength in numbers. We can all start sharing these types of things. It's another way for us. We can document these kind of things. And then other people can say, oh, that's been done. So again, this ties back to the first question of how much good the foundation can do by, maybe there's somebody who wasn't watching, but who could learn of this whole example and say, oh, well, that's been done before. We could do it.
I absolutely love that. And I love the personal testimony. Not only is it personal, of course, but it shows this permeation from this, the pinnacle of the Department of the Air Force down to a tactical level. And it speaks volumes. It speaks volumes to your leadership, to the legacy you've left behind that continues on. And I love that example. And when you change a life, you change a family's life, you change an organization's life, and it just grows. There's no, I guess, fence around that. So thank you for sharing that, General O'Brien. Ms. Goodwine, what achievements do you think over, the next generation of women do you think will continue on as your legacy?
Thank you for that question. And General O'Brien, thank you for sharing that. And I will tell you, having had the pleasure of having a couple conversations with you, that is so your nature. That is, I wouldn't expect anything differently from you based on the conversations, because there's plenty that have benefited from just being in the room with you. So thank you. And when I think about the legacy that I'm going to leave, I want it to be one that I told the story of how I got here so others can benefit. Because on this call, the 90 or so of you don't know, rather you will set a legacy as well. You don't know the next first that you would have. And I know a lot of times people ask me the question, how did you get here? What did you do? What was your career path? And I will tell you first, if you want women to start having a legacy, we need to start with girls that become women. So we need to reach down and start there at the age where we can impress upon them. And that's not high school. That's not middle school. Ladies and gentlemen on the line, It's in third grade. They have to start to see what the possibilities are for them. And so things that I do, so when I'm gone and I leave the CIO's office, there are some IT things that I'm going to do and people are going to say, Ms. Goodwine did that. But I want them to say, Ms. Goodwine was always accessible and she always shared her stories with others. And so one of the things I'm doing now, if you think about the Air Force for a minute, when it comes to development, we have an office in the headquarters that managed the career of general officers, one that managed chiefs, manages colonels, and senior executives. There is no office in the Pentagon or throughout Department of the Air Force that manages our senior civilians. We solely rely on the functional community to do that. And so I came up with the idea that I would start my own program in which I could start to build a bench of senior executives, so that one, there are women in the cohort, there's men as well. But the reason I did that is because if you look at my organization, 4 of the 5 positions came from outside the department, yet I have 4,000 eligible for those positions for Tier 1 SES. So you think about that. How can that be? And people will tell you, well, it's because the law, Title V, says you can't pre-select civilians, which is true. But if we had a bench of senior civilians ready to apply for those positions, this wouldn't be a conversation. And so that's something that I'm doing to start to build. So right now I have a cohort partnered with some other senior executives of 24 men and women that I'm preparing for that next Tier 1 SES job, rather that's within the Department of Defense or in the federal civilian space. They're going to be ready to compete for those jobs. And that's just my idea of how do I give back? To much given, much is required. I am here also because people helped me. People like General O'Brien helped me. Coaches, mentors, advocates. And when I say coaches, I mean, to your point, General O'Brien, people were watching and you were coaching and didn't even know it. Dr. Weatherspoon, I know the same was for you. People watched you as the top 1% across the department and said, I can be because how you carry yourself. Christy, I watched you when I joined the Air Force and I met you. And so those coaches, even though you haven't had that opportunity, and each of you on the line today, please remember that you are also coaching. Now, mentorship is a little different because it requires relationship and conversations, but mentors are important. And I will tell you the most important is advocacy. When you're not in the room, who is speaking up on your behalf? What are they saying about you? So every time you have a deliverable, every time you speak, every time you participate and interact with others, you are now interviewing and tell your story. And I assure you from that interaction, people are making decisions and will decide whether to advocate for you or not. And so to me, I think thinking about that will be my legacy. And then the one thing I want to leave you with from this question too is you're going to have people that I call diminishers that's going to be in your life that's going to tell you that you can't do something. They're going to say, good luck with that. I had that in my career. They're going to say, you're moving too fast. They're going to say, not yet, wait your turn. I will tell you, don't listen. Because if any of these panel members, myself and others had listened to that, we wouldn't be here and have these stories to tell you. You wouldn't have been, Mary O'Brien wouldn't have been the first commander. She's not afraid. So I want you to know, don't be afraid in order to be the first to do something. And so with that, the legacy I want to leave is one that I was accessible, and one that I gave back to what was given to me. All the things that I'll do in cyber and IT, and I spent my first 10 years in Intel, all those things, people that I work with and work for will remember those. But it's the people that may not have an opportunity to have met me or will read about me. That's what I want them to know about my legacy.
Well, I am a bit speechless after hearing just hearing the impact and the importance of legacy and what you would hope for your legacy to be. And I am grateful that I am in a very unique position to actually have worked with just about all of you on a very discreet way as a 4-letter or a 3-letter exec, and have truly been able to watch from the front line, watch how hiring processes go, watch who's being hired, and hear the conversations as like a trusted agent, as an exec, how to advocate for people when they're not in the room. And so I want to share that with you as a parting comment from me, that I've seen it. I've seen just about all of you do it. And I've taken a lot of notes, and I've walked away better from so many conversations and meetings. Even if I was taking notes for a 2-letter on the wall, it really changed how I thought, how I approach leadership and advocacy. There was a study done by Cornell several years ago that I guess determined that it takes statistically 3 women sitting at the decision-making table for one to be heard. And to learn to walk away with that, book knowledge, and then sit in rooms where you're kind of like, well, there's 2.5 women in here statistically. So now how does this work? And so it's been an honor moderating today. It has been truly fascinating. Again, fastening my seatbelt once again and listening and pulling the thread on so many important conversations, from legacy to leadership to policy, and bring it back full circle. So thank you all. I want to extend once again a heartfelt thank you to each of our participants for your valuable contributions, and a sincere expression of gratitude to our attendees for investing your time with us tonight. We trust that this event has ignited a spark of inspiration, encouraging you to consider joining the Women's Air and Space Foundation. By becoming a part of this community, you'll play a pivotal role in celebrating our collective legacy and igniting inspiration for generations to come. The website link is conveniently available on the screen and in the chat for your convenience. So now let's turn the floor over to our esteemed panelists for their closing remarks, starting with Chief Weatherspoon, followed by Ms. Nolta, General O'Brien, and then Ms. Goodwine.
Excuse me, point of contention. We're not quite done yet. We want to open the floor for questions in the chat. So we're going to turn it over to Monica so she can ask the question that's in the chat.
Okay, great. Can everyone hear me? Okay, awesome. Good evening. My name is Monica Mason, and I have been monitoring the chat with questions and comments that we have for our panelists. We received just several comments and participation from our close to 90 participants right now, excluding our panelist members. So big thank yous for the panelist members from multiple comments, just for the representation and for the insight. Dr. Weatherspoon, you received some shout outs from other Philly natives. Also support career field shout outs as well from Miss Savannah Kowal. We also received some admin questions that were answered in the chat. So if you if you're a participant and you have a few questions, just scroll through the chat as well to get some of those answers. So for the panelists, we do have one question from Miss Sherry Lamb, and this is directed to any of the panelists who want to answer the question. Sherry wrote, "Thank you very much to the panelists for being here. How have you built confidence and resiliency over the course of your career?" And again, that's open to any of the panelists.
Can I start? I will tell you, it's all about the narrative that you tell yourself. And so think of this. When you get ready to walk out the door in the morning, rather it's your front door, your side door, garage, it doesn't matter. I want to challenge you to put a mirror there. Why? Not because I want you to check your powder, and not because I want you to check your lipstick. I want you to do affirmations for yourself. Before you leave, you say, I can, I will, and I am, and whatever that is for that day. Because how you talk to yourself and what you internalize builds your confidence, or the adverse is true if you don't do that as well. In your folder that you take to every meeting, I want you to get a reflective piece of paper that when you're sitting in that meeting and you get that feeling in your gut that it's not going the right way, and you go, oh, I can't call my girlfriend, I can't get some encouragement from my mentor. I want that to be a mirror for you. Then at that moment, say to yourself, I can, I will, I belong here, I'm here because I've done all the work to get here. Again, it's about the narrative that you tell yourself. In your purse, you have a compact. It's not for your lipstick, ladies. Men, please tell your daughters, tell your wives, remind them. It is about the narrative. And so when I think about how I got here, one, those naysayers fueled me. You say I can't, I'm going to do it twice just because you said I couldn't, right? And then even though I went back to my corner and say, now how am I going to do this, right? And you just talk yourself through it. And I tell you, I'm not telling you something I read about in a book. I am telling you something that I actually do. The other piece is you have to have accountability partners. You need people around you that encourage you, support you, and challenge you. When you become the smartest in the group, get a new group, because that's how you grow and your old group become mentees. I am telling you. The last thing I'm going to say is, having been in command, and my panel members have also been in leadership roles. You know, when you have that squadron function, the commanders, you show up, but you also know when to leave, because the real fun starts when you leave. I want you to know that when you're working somewhere and your light can no longer shine because people keep throwing dark blankets over you, you need to act like that party and get out of there. It's time to start creating an exit strategy and leave. We often, as women, we sit places because it's like, well, and then we start doing that conversation in our head. I don't want you to do that. I want you to know when it's time to move on. And then with those affirmations, you'll have the conversation with yourself and you'll do that. And the reason I say plan before you leave, don't ever leave somewhere that you cannot go back. Do not burn bridges. This is a small department of the Air Force. It's a small department of defense, and it is a small community. You never know when you're going to meet people. But to build that encouragement for yourself, I tell you, the narrative that you tell yourself, you need people around you that's going to hold you accountable, pull your coattail when you step out of line, but they're going to be encouraging enough to help you get back in line. And remember, get your compact, ladies, because it is not for your lipstick. It is for you to tell yourself that you are where you are because you did the work. And I believe that.
I have something to add if anyone else is ready to go. So Ms. Goodwine, hype me up. I'm over here nodding north and south the entire time. And the only thing I want to add to that is boundaries. Because when you are in environments where you were consistently, where somebody is trying to give you a narrative outside of what you're telling yourself, right? You're doing all the right things, you're doing the affirmations, you're trying to convince yourself, but you're in an environment where it is just very draining and you find yourself tired and you have nothing to give at the end of the day. Understand that boundaries is directly connected to your level of resilience. Expect what you accept from people. You have to be able to be your own advocate. You have to be able to challenge different narratives and different mindsets. And in a way where we are emotional, humans are emotional creatures. It's okay to understand your emotions, but do the work so that you're able to regulate them as well. Because and I'm speaking from personal experience. I've had experiences where I'm sitting in a conference room with other peers. We're all first sergeants. And I had to do an experiment with some of my male first sergeants. And I said, I'm going to say something. I need you to repeat it. And then we're going to watch what happens after that. Because no, you are not crazy. Microaggressions are happening. Things are going on. And you have to be able to be like, you know what? I have to have a conversation to bring it to the attention. I was a senior master sergeant, and it was my command chief where I had to have a one-on-one with this individual to let him know hey, so you're dismissing things that I say, and I need to know why you're doing that. So we have to talk about it. Because a lot of the times it's that individual and what they have going on and what their experience is, and it's not you. But you have to be your own advocate, and you have to be able to stand on your own two, armed with information and data to be able to have a discussion about it, because you are going to have to challenge people. You are going to have to speak up for yourself. You're going to have to do that if you want to be successful and reach the level of your full capacity. And so one scenario, and then I'll be done. The chair at the conference table is also for you. I've watched young officers, we sit and have a meeting, there are no seat assignments at the conference table, and then I watch them fall to the back and it's empty seats there. And the officer, the young lieutenant or the captain that belonged to me, I'm like, there's your chair. Go sit in your chair. That chair is yours as well. And I think that that's a good analogy, because sometimes we convince ourselves that that chair is not for us. I've learned over time, I'm always in the front of pictures, and I'm always I'm always sitting at the conference table, because those are little tiny assertions that make sure that you retain, the power that you do have, because you have a lot of power. You just have to figure out how to wield it and work it to your benefit.
Dr. Weatherspoon, Ms. Goodwine, the very tangible strategies that you just left with us. I mean, they're very applicable, they're relevant, and I think you both just did a phenomenal job of granulating how to respond in the face of adversity, in the face of those sort of internal emotions while they're kind of whirling around and people are trying to put the blanket on your party, and I can't thank you enough for that. The chat is lighting up, and we've got time for one more question. And this question is for Ms. Goodwine and Ms. Nolta. Balancing the demands of a thriving career and fulfilling personal life is often characterized by the delicate interplay of balance, rhythm, and harmony. And navigating this intricate dance, it can be pretty challenging, especially in the midst of a very demanding career. How have you successfully managed this equilibrium, and what strategies can you leave us with that can help us integrate our work and our personal life? Ms. Nolta, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, so I really like that word harmonize, because as I was coming up, the word was balance, and balance, kind of has the meaning to even a connotation of everything's got to be even, and it can't always be even. So, just like the harmonies in a song, there's the voices that come forward and the voices that hang back and that sort of thing. And so I would say that sometimes there has to be more focus on mission. And so from a work-life harmonization perspective, sometimes you're going to be given, 80-90% to the mission, because that's what the mission demands at the time. And then, but in those times when you don't have to, that the urgency is not there, then that's when you need to remember to take a step back and take care of yourself, or to take care of your, pay attention to what you might have been missing at home or so forth. I can really only speak authoritatively as a married person with children for the last 38 years, and which kind of tells you how old I am. But having my husband has been a tremendous partner, and so in helping me, we helped each other figure out what the priorities needed to be at any given time in our life. And I would just say that prioritization is really, really the key of what the priority needs to be at a particular moment in your life and time, and that is where the energy has to be spent. And then remembering to reflect over what I think are four important pillars, which is, the spiritual, the physical, the mental, and the social, and making sure that you are harmonizing those across time. Not necessarily every single day are they going to be exactly, even or whatever. And And so, for me, it was hugely helpful. It was hugely empowering. And I would say that, my partner, my husband, made me braver to be able to attack what I needed to attack when I needed to attack it. And I think I did the same for him. I'd like to think that I did the same for him. And I think that our relationship was the most important relationship in our family, and that security and that example for our children, I think made our children feel safe and secure, and enabled them to become what I like to think are good American citizens that they are today. They're all grown and gone and off the payroll, which, is a good thing. They're all off the payroll, so maybe we did something right. But in any event, I would just say that prioritization and harmonization, remembering that the balance isn't always 25, 25, 25 across the pillars. It's sometimes 100% or, and nothing, because that's what the mission demands, or because that's what the family demands at any given time in your life.
I love that, Miss Nolta. And the thing that stood out to me as I listened was that you didn't do it alone. You didn't do it alone. And, whether you're married, single, or somewhere in between, you don't have to do it alone. And it oftentimes doesn't work out too well when you're trying to figure this harmony out by yourself. And
if I could jump in, because someone said earlier in the discussion about not being afraid to ask for help, because when if you are single, or even if you're in a relationship that is maybe difficult, never be afraid to ask for help, and because people want to help, and that will help strengthen you going forward as well. So thank you for that.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And Ms. Goodwine, I'm seeing you nodding your head, and I would love to hear from you, your personal experience as you kind of chartered this agency for over 30 years. How do you harmonize? How do you balance, and my mind kind of goes to blocking off my calendar, like, okay, I'm going to leave early on this day. The meetings will end early. I'm going to come in a little bit late. I'm not going to take a lunch break, and what do you do when you do all the things and you're still like, I don't have any harmony? What do you do?
Well, first of all, Christy, I was just nodding, like I couldn't stop nodding like a bobblehead, like, oh my gosh, you are nailing it. You are absolutely right. And so here's what I'll tell you, and this is funny. Balance is like, balance your life the way you balance your checkbook. And I'm going to pause there. You say, what do you mean? Because you do not take your money and equally distribute it across everything that you have to take care of in your checkbook. You give a little bit more of the mortgage than you might do to the electric bill. Why? Because that's the requirement. And so that's how you need to balance your life. You think about it. I'm a mother, I'm a sister, I'm a daughter, I'm a wife, I'm a friend, I work, so I'm an employee, I'm a supervisor, right? So if you just start to count the different roles you have, what you don't have is more time. And no matter how much money you have, you can never buy more time. So how are you going to spend it? You're going to spend it where the need is greatest at that time. If you're not familiar with her, if you listen to Brene Brown, great author, she talks about being bold and being brave. She told a story, and Christy, it's along the lines of what you just talked about with your husband. She said every day, her husband may say, hey, babe, today I got 30. She said, yeah, I got 50. They know that's 20 is not going to get done, but they're okay with that because they're not striving for this great 100. But what they realize is, okay, there might be 20 that we're willing to take risk on, but they do talk about where is that 20 that they are taking risk. So it's a deliberate decision. So I thought that was very interesting when she did that. So for me, to balance, rather you use balance, harmony, synchronize, coalesce, whatever synonym you want to use to get things done, you have to be deliberate about the decision that you're going to make. Then I think you have to learn to ask for help. Ladies, we are not super women. No one expects us to be, that's this mantra that we put on our own back and because we want the cape. You don't have to do that. So you have to ask for help, which is why earlier I said, make sure you have a support team around you. No one is going to give you a trophy when you end up breaking down, you're in the hospital because you did too much, because one, you tried to do it all yourself. So here's the litmus test for you. If someone called you and said, hey, can you take me to the airport? You say, yes. You probably didn't think twice about it. But yet now next week, when you need to go to the airport, you're afraid to ask someone. Why is that? Because are you afraid to ask people for those things that you yourself would do for them? And Dr. Weatherspoon, that's exactly what you just mentioned. You don't, so I'm saying that to say boundaries, yes. Balance, harmony, synchronization, yes. But for me, I have been very deliberate throughout my time. And there are times when I've overextended myself, I must admit. But then I have to go back to rule number one. I need to be more deliberate because I cannot get more time. So I will tell you, ask for help. Don't be afraid. You cannot do it all yourself. You're not intended to do it all yourself. And you say, well, I'm an introvert. I don't have a whole lot of friends. Please find a support group. There are professional organizations that can help you, because at the end of the day, really, you want to be able to have that whole self, and you want to be able to have joy, not happiness, but real joy. So that's what I think about.
Lots of notes. I am taking lots of notes. And again, ladies, the chat is blowing up. Lots of kudos for, again, the granulated advice. It's not the, hey, hang in there, but how do I hang in there? How do I harmonize? How do I create a legacy that inspires the next generation coming behind me? We have about 5 minutes left. And so with that, I'd like to turn the floor back to our panel, starting with Lieutenant General O'Brien, then we'll go to Ms. Nolta, and then we'll go up to Ms. Goodwine, and last but not least, Dr. Weatherspoon, in that order. For some, just a parting punch, what piece of advice would you like to leave for our participants today before we wrap today's session up? What's one thing you would like to leave with everyone participating today? Ma'am?
Sure. This has been amazing. So many wonderful comments. I would say if I had to choose one thing, based on both my careers as an intel officer and cyber officer and the work I've done with the WIT, is change is possible. And so the comments about the foundation being able to help recruit and retain, remember, and inspire. I love that. And so just super briefly, a change to inspire, when I was 25th Air Force Commander and I was a presiding officer at basic military training, I noticed that all the flights were named after former Chief Master Sergeants of the Air Force. At the time, they were all men. And then we went into the big room and there were pictures of all the Chief Master Sergeants and they were all men. And I thought, well, how are we inspiring all of those women and their families in this huge graduation? So I said something. And I said, and I just said, you're telling all of those women out there that this is not for you. And today, as a result specifically of that, they permanently changed the 319th Training Squadron to honor A1C Jacobson, who was the first female killed in the line of duty. And the 331st Training Squadron honors Chief Master Sergeant Peterson, the first female Chief Master Sergeant in the Air Force. So change is possible. And I think we should never forget that. Maybe not as quickly as we want or things like that, but you can make the change. Together, we can make changes. So thank you so much. I really have been honored to participate in this today.
Great advice. Thank you so much, General O'Brien. Ms. Nolta, please. One last nugget of wisdom.
So I'm going to repeat General O'Brien's comment that change is possible. If we leave you with one thing, change is possible. And I think that I would also say thank you very much for, inviting me to be on this inaugural event, this inaugural panel, this panel of esteemed colleagues. I'm truly honored. But I'm going to say it again, change is possible. So be who you are and raise your voice and bring those voices together, because I go back to my earlier comment about changing the way we talk, but also changing assumptions. Just because it's always been that way doesn't mean it has to continue to be that way, and help people think about a challenge or an issue in a different way. From our perspective as women, it's important because we have a different perspective. So yeah, go get them. And thank you again. I mean, this is amazing. I am so excited about the foundation. This is going to be awesome. Okay, now I'm done.
Thank you, Ms. Nolta. Ms. Goodwine.
I'm going to build on that. Thank you. Change is possible. It does take time. Don't be weary in well-doing. Don't expect a microwave result. Please take your time. The other thing, please join this organization, because like-minded women, iron sharpens iron. The last thing I'm going to leave with you, my advice is this, and I've used it throughout my career, and I will tell you it works. And if anyone wants to ask me about the skills mapping matrix that I used that landed me where I am today, I'm happy to talk about that. But here's what I'm going to tell you. You heard me earlier talk about people. People help me get to where I am, and they will help you too. Your coaches, your mentors, your advocates, your support team. But I have a different mnemonic for people. And I use it all the time when I'm mentoring and when I'm speaking, because it's the things I do on my end of the responsibility that landed me where I am. People can help me, but I had to make sure that I had done certain things so that they could advocate for me. And I'm going to tell you, people means pursue every opportunity, plan deliberately, learn continuously, and be excited for your failures and your successes. That is people. And you say, why is that? I've already talked about pursue, because that is action. That means there's something required for me to do. I cannot sit on my laurels and expect things to come to me and I clap about it. So pursue is active. Every opportunity, those that you're given and those that you have to make. You say, but I shouldn't do everything. You should. You have no idea that when someone asks you to volunteer at Land Reach for America, for instance, that the person that you are going to meet that may see you in the future. So every opportunity, plan deliberately. Do not leave things up to chance nor luck. Take action and take control. Learn continuously. This is one opportunity. Webinars. Attend professional organizations, make sure that you are taking the time to learn. And then excitement. Every time you fail, there's an opportunity to learn. And also celebrate when you win as well. So my advice to you, yes, the humans, the people that help you, got it. But I want you to pursue every opportunity, plan deliberately, learn continuously, and be excited. That's my other people, and that's my advice for you today.
Wow, Ms. Goodwine, thank you so much for sharing that mnemonic. Chief Weatherspoon.
So I'm a big fan of quotes, and one of my favorite quotes is by Malcolm X, and he says, so early in my life, I had learned if you want something, you had better make some noise. And so today we talked about how change is possible, but change also takes work. Change also takes work. So I think if we want to make the change and we want to make some noise, we have to not just talk the talk, we also have to walk the walk. And so joining the WASF is a beginning of you doing the work. So don't just join an organization just to say you'll be a part of it. Be willing to lend your time and talent to making this organization and other organizations like it grow. And so in order to, be the change we want to see, we have to put in the work to make sure that that change happens, and we have to make some noise. So don't be afraid to make some noise, especially when it's going to be in your best benefit.
Chief Weatherspoon, you continue to read my mind through the screen, ma'am. I want to say thank you so much to our esteemed panelists. Again, just a hearty gratitude and thanks for you spending time with us today, sharing your personal experience to imparting to us the wisdom that we get to walk away with. And of course, we couldn't have done this today without a lot of work from volunteers, from board members, which of course takes funding. So thank you to everyone who's donated to the foundation. And if you would like to donate to the foundation as it is growing, please check the link and check the screen so that you can make a donation. Any amount is a significant amount. It is the end of the year as well, and this is a tax write-off. Just a reminder. Again, at this point, I'd like to thank all of our participants that have joined us today, have invested their time into this conversation. We have one final video to leave you with as you reflect on today's discussion. Please stand by.
Glass ceilings have two things going for them. They're see-through, and they were meant to be broken. Since the beginning of the U.S. Air Force's history, women have set their sights beyond barriers and shattered any that got in their way. In 1943, women were called to serve out of necessity. With men increasingly heading to combat during World War II, their stateside roles were left open. What started out as an experiment evolved into a path that would change history. Women were vital to the war effort. They served as radio operators, maintenance specialists, and test pilots. Some even flew overseas to evacuate wounded troops from the sands of North Africa and the beaches of Normandy. They proved they were capable of more than tradition assumed. Little did they know that their curiosity and courage to do something different would set the foundation for future generations of women to rise above barriers. The first woman to earn 2 stars was an airman. The first female fighter pilot was an airman. The first military women to walk among the stars and command space shuttles were airmen. And the first woman to serve as the senior enlisted leader for any military branch is an airman. The Air Force has the most female members of all the military branches and has historically led the way in expanding opportunities for them to serve. But it's not just the number of women who serve, it's what each and every one brings to our force. Women's achievements in the Air Force and now the U.S. Space Force are endless. As both branches continue to evolve, what defines success has to. Reaching new heights is less about being the first and more about being empowered to be who you are and achieve what you want to achieve. Women have helped change and continue to advance standards, from fighting for all dependents to receive equal benefits, to earning the right to serve in combat, and for some, making the ultimate sacrifice. Standard issue no longer fits what we're capable of. It never did. As we set our sights higher, new leaders can step forward. They already have and will continue to make room for more. It's fitting that the 2 most forward-thinking branches serve 2 domains that have represented hope and possibility for centuries: the sky and the stars. The Air Force and the Space Force were established by looking up and daring to see more. So where will you set your sights? You never know how far you will go and who you might inspire along the way.
Wow. Just, why not dare to do more together, right? So thank you for this discussion. Thank you for keeping it real. So many things resonated with me on a personal level. And just when I think of stories and experience of women I know that it's just, we're all better for what we heard today. Again, I know I said wow before, but wow again. What a way to kick off our Women's Air and Space Foundation Incorporated. We have a lot of work to do. So to those who joined us today, thank you for your time. If you would like to be added to our distro list to get notes from today's session, the link to the published webinar, and just information about upcoming initiatives that you can be a part of, please email us at programs@womensairandSpace.org. So that's all we have for you today.